Dairy. It's probably one of the most controversial topics when discussing what constitutes a healthy diet. Dairy and lactose-free options are popping up everywhere as seemingly healthier alternatives. But will making the switch really have a big impact?
There's a bull in a matador drooling in the sky. In hell, there's heaven.
The biggest thing to discuss when considering dairy is lactose. Lactose is the sugar found in mammalian breast milk. Humans are easily able to digest lactose during their infancy because we have an enzyme known as lactase that breaks it down. However, when humans get weaned and start eating solid foods, the amount of lactase we produce is typically reduced dramatically. This is the case for most of the people in the world, which is why about 65% of the world's population has some form of lactose intolerance. There are populations that exist that have increased lactase activity even in adulthood, which is thought to be the result of a genetic mutation. So the bottom line is, no matter who you are, there's a pretty good chance you may experience some digestive discomfort if you drink a decent amount of milk. However, this problem mainly seems to arise with pasteurized milk. Raw milk naturally contains the lactase enzyme in it, which should help with the digestion of lactose. But people are very rarely drinking raw milk nowadays. Though many lactose intolerant people can attest to raw milk being easier to digest than pasteurized milk, some of the research does not support that claim. So, what's going on here? Most people do have a reduced capacity to digest lactose past weaning, but to what degree differs from person to person. Lactose intolerance isn't as black and white as you have it or you don't. The amount of lactase you produce is all based on your genetics. Those with lactose intolerance who produce less lactase may find raw milk to be a good alternative, while those who produce close to none probably won't experience a benefit. This is also why some people with lactose intolerance may be fine consuming cheese or other fermented dairy products like yogurt or sour cream. During the fermentation process, bacterial cultures are added to milk that digest most of the lactose. How much of the lactose the bacteria get rid of really depends on the cultures used and how long they've had exposure to that lactose. This is why aged cheeses will typically have much lower levels of lactose than other kinds of cheese. So, if you typically have a bad reaction with lactose-rich dairy, you'd probably benefit from experimenting with lower lactose fermented dairy products. If you find that cheese in particular gives you a hard time, especially if the problem persists when you have an aged cheese, the problem may not be the lactose at all. It could be the protein. Dairy products typically contain two main types of protein, whey and casein. Whey protein actually doesn't seem to cause much of an issue for most people, but it is instead the casein that causes most digestive problems. Specifically, it is the A1 casein protein that is particularly concerning. Somewhere on the timeline of cattle domestication, cows started producing more A1 casein protein and less A2 casein proteins due to a genetic mutation. When digested, A1 casein proteins will break down into peptides called BCM7, while A2 caseins do not. It is these BCM7 fragments that cause most of the issues. This study looked at the different responses people had to milk with both types of casein and to milk with just A2 casein. All of the subjects were picked on the basis that they were intolerant to commercial milk, typically experiencing some kind of digestive discomfort after drinking it. Unsurprisingly, when these subjects consumed milk with both caseins, they experienced a myriad of different gastrointestinal issues such as bloating. However, they experienced none of these symptoms with only A2 milk. 23 of the subjects were tested to confirm their lactose intolerance, yet they still experienced none of these symptoms. Of course, regardless of the casein makeup of the milk is always going to have some lactose. This begs the question, is it really lactose intolerance or is it an allergic reaction to these A1 casein proteins? It seems paradoxical, since there is a mechanism behind lactose intolerance and even a test to confirm that it does in fact exist. It appears that lactose does cause some issues, but these issues are pretty insignificant without the A1 casein proteins there to compound them. This could also explain why the research shows little difference between consuming raw and pasteurized milk. Subjects saw significant rises in gastrointestinal inflammatory meteors, but also in markers of inflammation in the blood. But how could a component of the diet raise inflammation not just in the gut, but throughout the rest of the body too? Dr. Alessio Fasano has done extensive research on the effect of intestinal health on the development of autoimmune diseases. More specifically, through his research on gluten, he suggests that intestinal permeability is often a major contributor in the pathogenesis of these conditions. The reason behind this is that intestinal permeability allows components of the diet to leak into the bloodstream. Once in the bloodstream, certain food particles like gluten and A1 casein proteins will be treated as foreign invaders by the body, causing an immune response. This can cause the immune system to become hyperactive over time, eventually attacking healthy cells, which leads to autoimmunity. While there are certainly numerous factors that contribute to intestinal permeability, certain inflammatory mediators within the gut can cause apoptosis of the cells that line the intestine. Apoptosis is basically cellular suicide, and when this process is accelerated, it of course will lead to increased intestinal permeability. You don't need to understand this entire picture, but just notice that one of the pathways leading to apoptosis requires activation of this cytokine, interleukin 4. If we look at the previous study when comparing milk with and without A1 caseins, we can see that when the A1 milk was consumed, subjects saw a significant rise in interleukin 4. This could explain the inflammation these subjects experienced throughout the body in response to A1 casein. Now, before it sounds like I'm telling you that snacking on some string cheese is going to give you MS, let me point out that autoimmune disease takes multiple factors lining up to develop. However, it is worthwhile to consider the effect that A1 casein could have on a smaller scale. A moderate inflammatory response in the gut could mean a moderate inflammatory response throughout the body. This mild inflammation could be causing you to feel suboptimal and you might not even realize it. It might be worth it to just cut out dairy for a while, or at least go for options like A2 milk and goat cheese, which don't contain any A1 casein. You might find out that you have a bit more energy, or just feel more clear-headed in general, but you won't know until you try. Now, I'd love to be able to tell you that the trouble with A1 casein protein ends with an inflammatory response, but unfortunately, that's not the case. BCM7, one of the products of A1 casein metabolism, can actually bind to mu-opioid receptors. After all, the full name is beta-casomorphin 7. It has morphine-like effects. Mu-opioid receptors are important for regulating our feelings of pleasure for things like food, sex, and social interactions. However, when these receptors get overly stimulated due to drugs, it causes dysregulation of the brain's reward system and can interfere with our ability to learn. Of course, this has been heavily linked to drug addiction. Does this mean dairy with A1 casein protein can be addicting, or possibly mess with our sense of pleasure and capability to learn? Maybe. BCM levels in the blood have been thoroughly linked to neurological dysfunctions like autism, with the mechanism involving its opiate-like effect on the brain. Remember, BCM7 only comes from A1 casein, so the values in the blood are indicative of the amount of A1 casein in the diet. It's reasonable to think that dairy with this type of casein could have a noticeable effect on various aspects of our brain. So yes, dairy can absolutely be bad, but it depends on the kind and quality of the dairy you consume. If you're consuming dairy with little lactose and A1 casein, then dairy can actually be one of the best things to include in your diet. Butter and ghee are almost pure fat with very little, if any, protein or lactose at all. When these products are grass-fed, they are a very good source of vitamin A, E, and K2. They are also one of the best food sources of butyric acid, an important fatty acid for gut health. Fermented dairy options in general could be uniquely beneficial. Things like cheese, sour cream, and yogurt all come from adding bacterial cultures to milk or cream. These bacteria will consume the lactose and produce lactic acid, giving these foods their unique textures and tastes. The bacteria are actually present when you consume these foods, and they have the potential to act as probiotics. Some of the types of bacteria used in dairy cultures have been shown to have a wide array of benefits, like modulating inflammation, killing pathogens, and even lowering blood pressure. In conclusion, dairy can absolutely help you optimize your health, and can also be a driving factor in making you feel subpar. In my opinion, it really comes down to the person and the quality of dairy you choose to consume. Personally, I have grass-fed butter, goat and other aged cheeses, and sour cream on nearly a daily basis, and I feel great. I am very weary of lower quality options since they have given me digestive problems in the past, and I know how bad too much A1 casein can be. So be smart with your dairy. Try different kinds, or even try cutting it out altogether. You might find out it was worth it. What are your thoughts on dairy consumption? Should you trust it or avoid it like the plague? Let us know in the comments below and subscribe for more content like this.